Clara and I had a marriage of convenience. In the 3 years since we signed the papers, she never let a single soul know I existed, because in her heart, the role of husband would always belong to him. Not long ago, she suddenly asked me to move into the guest room. I glanced at the man standing behind her. I understood. Her real husband was back. After 3 years of a secret marriage, the one that got away had returned. Through the peephole, I could see the man's handsome, expectant smile. When I opened the door, his smile froze. "Who's this?" Clara came out of the kitchen, and the moment she saw him, the plate in her hands crashed to the floor. David pointed at me, his eyes turning red. "Clara, who is he?" I looked at Clara. She avoided my gaze, stammering, "He's the live-in housekeeper." David let out a sigh of relief. "Oh, a housekeeper. You scared me." Clara shot me a guilty look before pulling him off her. David pouted and pointed to his luggage on the floor. "Hey you, take my stuff to Clara's room." My face darkened. "David," Clara said with a frown, "it's not a good time. You should go stay at your parents' place." David's eyes welled up. "Are you still mad at me? I've had 3 years to think, and I know now that I've always loved you. I only got with that other woman to make you jealous. We broke up. Clara, can we please start over?" Clara fell silent. I guess I was being presumptuous. David grabbed his suitcase and ran off, his voice choked with sobs. Clara instantly moved to chase after him, but I stepped in her way, my eyes questioning. "Leo, I'll explain about David when I get back. Right now, I have to go after him. I can't let him be out there alone." She pushed past me and ran out. In such a hurry, she didn't even change her shoes. I stood at the door for a long time, then let out a self-deprecating laugh. My marriage to Clara had only ever been a piece of paper. 3 years ago, David had fallen for a street artist and dropped everything to go abroad with her. Clara was heartbroken, and under pressure from her family, she started going on blind dates. That's when we met. Clara always scheduled her dates at the coffee shop where I worked. That day, she had once again sent a suitor storming off. Seeing how dejected she looked, I walked over on an impulse. "Hi, do you need any help?" She glanced up at me, nodded listlessly, and said offhandedly, "Yes. Can you marry me?" The moment the words left her mouth, she laughed at herself, grabbed her coat, and left. We met again at the hospital. My grandma had been declared critically ill, and I was sitting helplessly in the hospital corridor, crushed by the cost of the ICU. Clara was there delivering some documents for a friend when she saw me. She looked even worse than the last time we'd met. Without a word, she sat down on the floor next to me. We were like 2 abandoned puppies, comforting each other in silence. The next day, her assistant found me with a contract. She said Clara would pay all of my grandma's hospital bills in one lump sum and give me an additional $20,000 a month. The conditions were that I enter a contract marriage with her to satisfy her family, that I tell no one about it, and that it would last until David came back to the country. I originally treated this marriage as just another part-time job. For 3 years, I forced myself to stay grounded, silently repeating Clara is not mine 3 times before bed every night. But the way Clara looked at me began to change. She said she regretted it, that she wanted to make our fake marriage real. I knew my place and rejected her clearly many times. But then Clara started doing strange things. When I was busy, she would go to the hospital to keep my grandma company and read her stories. Knowing I had stomach problems, she went into the mountains to learn massage techniques from an old master. He wouldn't teach outsiders, so she just kept going back, even getting lost in the mountains for a whole day because of it. I thought my heart was made of stone, but Clara always found a way to make me waver. The day I truly decided to be with her was my 25th birthday. My birthday is also the anniversary of my parents' death. That day, I had complained the whole car ride about them forgetting my birthday. Midway, a semi-truck crashed into us. My dad pushed me out through the car window and told me to keep walking forward and never look back. Suddenly, there was a massive explosion behind me. I turned around and watched my parents get swallowed by a sea of fire. Every year after that, my birthday brought nightmares, so I developed a habit of not sleeping on that day. When Clara found out, she started staying up with me. I had an old phone I treasured. My mom had shoved it into my hands right before the car exploded. It was broken and I could never get it fixed. Clara used all her connections, traveling to more than a dozen cities until she finally found all the parts to repair it. On the phone was an audio recording my parents had left me. It turned out they hadn't forgotten my birthday that day. They had planned a surprise. At the end of the recording, my parents told me they loved me. I broke down completely, sobbing uncontrollably and repeating to Clara over and over, "My parents loved me. They loved me." No matter how many times I said it, she nodded firmly, responding to every word. That night, I cried myself to sleep. For the first time in over a decade, I didn't have a nightmare on my birthday. From that day on, I fully accepted Clara into my life. Clara came back the next morning. The moment she walked in and saw me on the sofa, the smile on her face faltered. Then her brow furrowed. "Leo, you've been up all night?" I blinked my dry eyes. "Is everything with David taken care of?" Clara walked over, knelt in front of me, and stroked my head. I had no idea he was coming back. His mother contacted me a week ago. She said David wasn't doing well abroad, that his ex-girlfriend Sarah was messing with his head and it made him sick. He thinks he's only been gone for 3 years and has forgotten everything that happened in between. I looked her in the eyes. "So?" Clara bit her lip, looking conflicted. "If David gets agitated again, he might hurt himself. We talked it over, and since no one knows we're married anyway, we'll just hide it from him for now. We'll put on an act until he gets better. Leo, you've always been so understanding and never made things difficult for me. You can understand this time too, right?" I forced a smile. "What does put on an act mean? Does it mean you have to love him like you did 3 years ago?" "Leo, this is the best way." I tried to argue. "There are so many ways to treat mental illness now. If he needs it, I can recommend some books. Modern medication is also very advanced. You don't have to go that far." Under my pleading gaze, Clara's frown deepened. "Leo, I only see David as a little brother now. Don't overthink it." She gave me a perfunctory hug. "Okay, be good. I'm exhausted. I'm gonna get some sleep." Watching her walk away, I hugged my knees, a sense of unease washing over me. At some point, I had dug my nails so deeply into my arms that they'd left marks. About 2 hours later, a cheerful ringtone broke the silence. Clara's eyes were still closed, but she instinctively answered the call. She threw off the covers and hastily grabbed a coat. "I'm here. I'll be right back." I looked at her and asked calmly, "When did you change your ringtone?" For a moment, Clara's expression was unnatural. She dodged the question. "Leo, they need me over at David's. Go to bed early, don't wait up for me." With that, she walked around me and left. I dug my fingers into my palms, and suddenly, a lot of things became clear. It wasn't that she had changed her ringtone. It was that there had always been a special ringtone, one that just hadn't rung for the past 3 years. That evening, Clara brought David back with her. Seeing all his luggage, my heart sank. David wandered around the home I had personally decorated, then pointed to the master bedroom with a smile. "Clara, is that our room?" I looked at Clara in disbelief. "David, why don't you sit here for a bit? Help yourself to whatever you want to eat. The housekeeper and I are going to go upstairs and get the room ready." In the bedroom, Clara started packing up my things while explaining, "David's condition is worse than I thought. The doctor said we should try to go along with him as much as possible. We grew up together, I can't just abandon him. Leo, please move your things to the guest room for now. We can't let David find out we're married." She bustled around, only turning back when she noticed I hadn't moved. Seeing my expression, Clara gave a weary smile and reached out to pat my head. I subtly dodged her touch. She took my hand instead. "Are you jealous? Come on. You're practically his big brother. Surely you can spare a room for him, right?" I looked her in the eyes. "I can spare a room, but not my wife." Clara's smile froze. She sighed. "What are you thinking? David and I are like brother and sister. He's not in a condition to live alone right now, and I promised his parents I'd look after him. I'll feel better if he's here with me." Perhaps seeing that I was genuinely angry, Clara stopped what she was doing and came over to hug me. She buried her face in my neck, her voice muffled. Honey, haven't you always wanted to travel to Scandinavia? As soon as this is over, we'll leave right away and finally take that honeymoon we never had. Before I could answer, David let out a scream from downstairs. Clara immediately rushed down. When David saw her, he threw himself into her arms. Clara, I just heard another person's voice in my head. He said you were going to leave me. Clara patted his back soothingly. That's not real. I would give up everything before I'd give up on you. Really? What if someone tries to take you away from me? Clara gently pinched his cheek. Silly, no one can take me away. Don't you remember? When we were kids, you found my secret obey button. All you have to do is press it, and I'll always be there for you. David buried himself contentedly in her embrace. I watched everything unfold from the top of the stairs. Maybe I was imagining things, but when David looked up at me, the corners of his lips curled into a slight smile. Late at night, I sat alone on the bed, holding a small notebook. When Clara and I first got together, she told me she would make mistakes. She asked that if she ever did something wrong, I would give her a chance. I half-jokingly told her, I'm not someone who gets angry easily, and I like you so much that I could give you lots and lots of chances. But there are some lines you can't cross. I'll keep a little notebook with me. If the day comes when it's all filled up, I'll leave you and never come back. Clara, nestled in my arms, shook with laughter. Yes, sir. I tried my best to help David, thinking that the sooner he recovered, the sooner Clara would come back to me. After getting his contact info, I sent him links to several patient support groups. I also shared some books I thought might be helpful. Who knew that later that day, David would start screaming and smashing things, clinging to the windowsill and crying hysterically. He wouldn't let anyone near him except Clara. Clara held a trembling David in her arms, her heart aching as she whispered, Shoo, don't be scared. It's okay now. Clara, he said I was crazy, David sobbed, his eyes red. I'm not. Okay, you're not. Our David is perfectly healthy. David clung to Clara tightly, glaring at me with hatred. Clara, I hate your housekeeper. Can you get rid of him? Clara tensed up. David, I don't want to see him. Make him leave. He said I'm sick, but I'm not a psycho. David leaned halfway out the window, screaming like a madman. Clara's eyes reddened with pain. Okay, I'll do anything you say. I'll make him leave. Just come down first. She dragged me out of the room, her eyes blazing with anger, her tone accusatory. Leo, when are you going to stop this? My face went pale. I didn't say that. I just shared some resources with him. Clara closed her eyes impatiently. By shoving that stuff in his face, aren't you just reminding him of it? How do you expect him to handle that? I opened my mouth, but there was nothing to say. I told you, David living with us is temporary. Can you stop being so suspicious and hurting innocent people? I stood there, stunned. Look, Leo, I don't have time to coddle you right now. You saw what David is like. He doesn't like you. Just go stay in a hotel for a few days. Without another glance at me, Clara turned and went back into the room. I could hear her soft, soothing voice through the door. I bit my lip so hard it almost bled, my hands scratching at my arms. Soon they were covered in deep red marks. After all this time, Clara had never even once asked why I was in so many patient support groups, why I knew so much about mental illness. She didn't know I have severe bipolar disorder, swinging between mania and depression. I live every day in a state of self-doubt. I feel like I can't do anything right, that I'm a waste of life, completely useless. I don't trust people easily, and I certainly don't dare give myself completely to someone else. That's why I kept rejecting her feelings for so long. It was only after she helped me resolve the knot of grief I carried for my parents that my condition began to improve. In the time we were together, she slowly became my entire emotional anchor. I depended on Clara. I couldn't live without her. But now I felt like I was drowning. I lived in a hotel for over a month. With me out of the house, David seemed to stabilize. Every day, he would post on his social media feed about his life with Clara. Anyone who didn't know better would think they'd been married for years. Clara's messages became less and less frequent. It went from talking for hours every day to a few texts and finally just a simple good morning and good night. Almost every time, she would repeat that she and David were just like siblings, that she loved me. After a while, I couldn't tell if she was trying to reassure me or convince herself. The turning point came this morning. Clara had been staying home with David for days and hadn't been to the office. Amy, from the admin department, came by the house with some documents for her to sign. Amy and I were on good terms, and she knew everything about my situation with Clara. Seeing David walking around in my pajamas, she said casually, "Clara, I saw your husband out the other day. All couples fight, it's no big deal. You just have to be a little patient with guys, you know?" David lunged forward and grabbed Amy by the throat. "What are you talking about? What husband? Clara can only love me." Amy, who saw David as nothing more than a homewrecker, was no pushover. She yanked his hair and pulled out her phone, showing him a picture of my marriage certificate with Clara. "Take a good look, you shameless creep. They're legally married." David clutched his head and screamed, and the two of them started fighting. By the time I got home, Clara had just managed to pull them apart. David's clothes were torn, and he had a scratch on his face. Amy just looked a little disheveled. When David saw me, he started crying even louder. He grabbed Clara's hand like a lifeline. "Clara, you promised me. You promised you wouldn't leave me." "David, calm down. Leo and I will both be good to you." "I don't want that." David threw his arms around Clara's neck. "Clara, you're all I have. If you leave me, I'll have nothing left to live for." Clara looked at me, her eyes full of apology. Finally, she raised a hand and gently patted David's back. "Then tell me, what should I do?" David whimpered, pleading, "Clara, I can't live without you. Please divorce that man, okay?" Clara stared at David for a long time, and once again, his tears wore her down. "Okay." Amy stared at Clara in disbelief. "Are you out of your freaking mind?" Before she could rush forward, I pulled her toward the door. "Leo, what are you doing? Let me go. You can't let her get away with this. Are you a damn saint? Let me go. I'm gonna kill that witch." We hadn't been outside for long when Clara came running after us. Her eyes were red. "Honey, it's just a temporary solution." In that situation, I didn't have any other choice. I looked at her calmly and smiled. "I know." Clara breathed a sigh of relief. "I'm glad you're not angry. Don't worry. I'll sort things out with David as soon as possible and bring you home." I stepped away from her touch. "You should go back." "Okay, honey. Wait for me." With that, Clara hurried back inside. Amy looked at me, exasperated. "You actually believe her?"
Ich glänzte her.
"Let's go." On the way, Amy kept lecturing me, trying to snap me out of my love-induced haze. But over the past few days, I had already thought things through. I shouldn't have put so much of myself into one person. Clara's affection might have offered me temporary relief, but it couldn't save me. I looked back at the place I had lived in for 3 years. Then I turned away for good. Before leaving the city, I mailed the little notebook, filled with disappointments, to Clara. Along with it was a signed divorce agreement. When the package arrived, Clara was taking a nap with David in her arms. Woken up by the doorbell, she was annoyed. Hearing that the package was from me, her frown deepened. "TSK, what does Leo want now?" She tore open the package and saw the little notebook first. "What's this?" Just as she was about to open it, David woke up. Clara tossed the package onto the entryway cabinet. Another 3 days passed before Clara realized we hadn't messaged each other in a long time. Staring at the empty chat window, she finally remembered the package. Looking at the sleeping David beside her, Clara seemed to recall the 3 years we had spent together day in and day out. She tiptoed downstairs and retrieved the half-opened package from the cabinet. She pulled the papers out of the envelope. The first words she saw were divorce agreement. When she saw my signature and thumbprint on the agreement, Clara froze. The papers fluttered from her grasp. A moment later, she stumbled up the stairs, knocking things over, falling and getting back up. David was woken by the noise. He rubbed his eyes. "Clara, what's wrong?" Clara pushed him aside and fumbled for the phone on the nightstand. I need to call Leo. David had unconditional access to her phone. On some ordinary night, he had deleted my number. The funny thing was, after 3 years together, Clara couldn't even remember my phone number. It wasn't that she had a bad memory. She could remember David's birthday, his social security number, even his passport number. She was known for her photographic memory when it came to numbers. Just 11 digits. If Clara had cared enough, she could have memorized it with a single glance. She stared helplessly at the phone screen, panic rising in her eyes. The next day, Clara managed to contact me. Have you signed the agreement? There was silence on her end. After a moment, her choked voice came through. Leo, I'm so sorry. I paused. It's fine. I'm grateful for the time you spent with me. It was always a transaction. It had a pleasant start, so let's have a decent end. Clara's voice was frantic. No, I don't want it to end. Leo, you know my feelings for David are just a sense of responsibility. I love you. Does taking responsibility for him involve kissing him? Clara fell silent. She probably couldn't figure out how I knew. David sent me the photo from her phone. It's probably still sitting in her photo album. Maybe Clara resisted at first, but in the end, she gave in. After all, if she got caught, she could always say she was forced. That was just David being immature. It was an accident. Clara, you're being really pathetic. I closed my eyes and ran a hand through my hair in frustration. Just sign the divorce papers. Let's part on good terms. Leo, even if I was wrong this time, you can't just sentence me to death. You said you'd give me a chance. Why make things so ugly? Hearing that, I froze for a moment, my eyes staring blankly into space. It seemed she hadn't even looked at the notebook. A sharp pain shot through my heart, and I winced. After a long silence, Clara's voice was colder when she spoke again. Leo, you can't leave me. Don't forget, your grandma is still in the hospital. Without money, her health will fail. You wouldn't want to see her at her age, pushed into a hospital hallway. Would you? I gripped the phone tighter. Blinking my stinging eyes, I let out a dry laugh. The salary you've paid me over the last 3 years is more than enough to take care of my grandma for the rest of her life. But thank you for your generosity. In the end, we couldn't help but drive knives into each other's hearts. After hanging up, I stood on the rooftop, letting the wind whip my face for a long time. By the time my face was numb, I finally came back to my senses. I turned and saw a pale-skinned girl sitting by the rooftop stairwell, sketching furiously on a pad. She looked like a gust of wind could knock her over, but her eyes were incredibly bright. The girl looked up, saw me, and hesitated before offering an apologetic smile. Sorry, I couldn't help myself. She turned her sketchbook toward me. On it was a drawing of me, staring into the distance as the wind blew. Every strand of hair was captured, flying wildly as if trying to hold on to something. Before I could say anything, a nurse hurried up. Lily, you're wandering off again. Get back inside. What if you catch a chill? The girl smiled good-naturedly and quickly admitted fault, as if she'd been caught many times before. Don't worry, Maria. I stayed far from the edge. The wind can't get in. As she spoke, she couldn't help but cough a few times, her face growing even paler. Come on, let me help you back. Before leaving, she left the drawing where it was and gave me a polite smile. I stared after her, stunned. And you, the nurse said, turning to me, get back to your room. Dr. Mason is looking everywhere for you. I nodded. I had been receiving treatment at this hospital and had my grandma transferred here as well. After a routine check of my vitals, I looked at the drawing on my bedside table and, on a whim, asked, Dr. Mason, do you know a girl here? She's an amazing artist, but she looks very frail. I think I heard them call her Lily. Dr. Mason finished for me. I gave a slight nod. I didn't think you'd know patients from other departments. Dr. Mason gave a non-committal shrug. Lily's different. All the doctors in this hospital know her. A lot of doctors at other hospitals know her too. How is she different? He continued, because Lily lives at the hospital year-round. She knows everyone. Is she very sick? Dr. Mason just said, Very. so sick that no one can cure her. She's just living on medication. At this, Dr. Mason sounded a bit regretful. Anyway, you need to take care of yourself. Remember to take your meds on time. Before he left, Dr. Mason looked at me. Leo, it's been a long time since you've been this interested in something. He stepped out the door and added, that's a good thing. I was silent, cracking my knuckles one by one. Why was I so interested? Maybe I was just curious how someone who could die at any moment could have such bright eyes. To keep up the pretense that I was busy with work, I waited 2 days before visiting my grandma. As soon as I walked in, I saw a familiar figure. Lily was as thin as ever, her voice soft but still holding its own in a debate. Ma'am, the local news report said the characters on this rock were formed naturally. It was on the news, it has to be true. Lily was holding her phone, playing a video for my grandma. Grandma waved her hand dismissively. That's not right. I remember it clearly. It was 1951, and I was with the volunteer army on our way to Korea. We passed through this village and got trapped underground for 5 or 6 days. We carved characters on that rock to keep track of the time. Many are gone now, but I know that one. There was a girl who couldn't read, and I was teaching her. Her writing was all crooked, you could just barely make out the shape. Grandma laughed heartily. I can't believe kids these days think it's natural. When she was young, my grandma was a true patriot, dedicating her youth to serving the country. It was because she pushed herself so hard back then that she had so many lingering health issues in her old age. Lily, having been thoroughly educated, looked at my grandma with pure admiration. I watched them from the doorway for a long time. Unlike when she talked with Clara, my grandma was like a peer with Lily. They argued and bantered. I could tell she was much more relaxed, not having to constantly mind her words around a younger person. Grandma looked up and saw me, waving happily. Leo, come here. Though she was happy to see me, she couldn't help but complain. You work so hard. You should rest when you have time. Why are you always running to the hospital? I missed you. The old woman shot me a playful glare, but the corners of her mouth turned up. Then, she introduced me to her new friend. Lily looked at me nervously. Before she could say something like, "We meet again," I extended my hand.
I'm Leo.
She smiled.
I'm Lily.
We had a tacit understanding not to mention our first meeting on the rooftop. Lily went back to her room, leaving me and my grandma alone. Watching her leave, Grandma sighed. She's such an interesting girl. It's a shame life has been so cruel to her. She took my hand. By the way, Leo, how have you been lately? I came back to myself and smiled. I'm doing great, Grandma. Don't worry. She didn't press further, just as she had never asked about Clara. She just said, whatever decision you make, Grandma will always support you. On my way to get hot water, I ran into Lily again. She really did love to wander. Lily was holding 2 large oranges, standing up straight and staring at me with her wide, round eyes, looking utterly nervous. Leo, can I call you that? I nodded. She smiled and pushed the oranges into my arms. I heard the smell of oranges can make people feel better. The moment she finished speaking, a nurse whisked her away. I stared at the bright orange in my hands. Did I look that miserable? I thought I had been trying so hard to smile. As I was reading by the window, Lily was downstairs, waving frantically and pointing excitedly at a newly bloomed flower, as if it were a discovery of utmost importance. I glanced down. It was just a common begonia, the kind you see all year round. The green belt in my apartment complex was full of them. I coolly turned my gaze back to my book. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw her looking around the flower, scratching her head, unable to understand how anyone could be uninterested in something so beautiful. As expected, 3 seconds later, she was apprehended by a nurse again. I shook my head with a helpless smile and turned the page. This was the 5th time this week. To hide my illness, I could only visit my grandma 3 times a week, and Lily would be there for 2 of those visits. She was always holding a booklet and studying it with my grandma. The moment I walked in, she would put it away. My curiosity reached its peak. Finally, I stopped her outside the room. Lily, can I see what's in that booklet? Her eyes lit up, as if she had achieved some goal. Lily cleared her throat. I thought you weren't interested in anything. My gaze fell. The flicker of interest I'd managed to muster was extinguished. Never mind. Hey, Lily grabbed my arm. You can see it. She whispered it was meant for you anyway. Her thin, pale arm held my wrist, and a delicate warmth spread from her hand. She was so frail, yet she felt so strong. Lily's ears turned slightly red as she handed me the booklet. It was a simple sketchbook, filled with drawings of landscapes and buildings. On the back of each drawing was a short note. Seeing the words, I was slightly taken aback. Lily rubbed her nose sheepishly. I drew all of these. I've never been outside, so I've always longed to see the world. I flipped through it quietly. Every page radiated the artist's love for the world. The gray world I saw was a kaleidoscope of color for Lily. Leo, you're very lucky. Lily said out of the blue, you have a grandma who loves you, friends who care about you, and a healthy body. She gave a bitter smile. You can run, you can stand in the rain, you can cry when you want to cry and laugh when you want to laugh. Not like me. I can't even have big mood swings because one moment of excitement or sadness could kill me. So, Leo, you're so fortunate, and the world just happens to be so wonderful. You have to see more of it. I stood there for a moment, then pushed the sketchbook back into her arms. You're quite the little philosopher. Back in my room, there were several oranges on the bedside table, some shriveled, others fresh and glowing. I picked one up and slowly peeled it. The citrusy mist from the peel burst into the air, a sharp, clean scent. I had never noticed before how the smell of oranges could lift one's spirits. Looking out the window, the begonias in the green belt swayed in the wind, their colors vibrant. Everything was so beautiful. After that, it became my routine to sit in a chair in the hospital room, basking in the sun, listening to my grandma and Lily bicker and chat. Whenever they couldn't agree, they'd demand I take a side. But before I could choose, they'd have already made up and moved on to the next topic. Unfortunately, this peace was shattered when Clara showed up. She had finally finished reading the notebook I left her. When she found me, she looked haggard, her face ashen and her eyes bloodshot. At that moment, I was planting flowers with Lily. Clara rushed over and pulled me into an embrace. She buried her face in my hair. I know everything now. I'm so sorry. I barely heard what she was saying. I had only one thought. Her sudden appearance would scare Lily. But Lily used all her strength to pry Clara's arms off me. Let go. He doesn't like it. I looked at Lily, surprised. I probably didn't even realize it myself, but my body already had an instinctive, physical revulsion to Clara. I was standing there, completely rigid, my brow furrowed in disgust. The look on my face stung Clara. Leo, do we have to be like this? I pushed her hand away and moved Lily behind me. Are you here because the divorce papers are ready? I gave you my lawyer's contact information. You can just deal with her. Clara's eyes reddened. I know you left because you're sick. Leo, I can be there for you. So, she thought I left because I didn't want to be a burden? I laughed, too tired to argue. Go home. If you won't sign the papers, I'll see you in court. With that, I took Lily's hand and started walking away. She was very quiet the whole way. I gently flicked her forehead. What are you thinking about? She looked up.
Leo, I'm sorry.
I didn't protect you back there. I was taken aback, then smiled. It's better this way. It wouldn't be worth it if you got hurt because of her. My gaze shifted away. That was my ex-wife. She only came looking for me because she has some lingering regrets. But from the moment I decided on a divorce, she became nothing to me. Lily nodded softly. Then you have to tell me if you need anything. I will, I smiled. By the way, how come I've never seen your family visit you all this time? Lily paused. Oh, they're probably too busy. Clara was more stubborn than I thought. She came to the hospital with a huge bouquet of flowers and announced dramatically, Leo, I'm going to win you back. I was furious. I just ignored her and walked past. A nurse came over with a frown to shoo her away. Please keep it down. A hospital isn't part of your little drama. Clara went back to her old tricks, trying to get to me through the people around me. When Grandma and Lily were chatting, she had a giant screen installed in the room, playing a loop of scenic videos. When Grandma needed to rest, she would cluelessly try to read stories to her. After a week of this, I went to visit my grandma and overheard their conversation from outside the door. Grandma's usual gentle demeanor was gone, replaced by the iron will she must have had decades ago. Ms. Liu, I think there's something you need to understand. I liked you before because Leo liked you. My kindness to you was conditional on his happiness. Without him, we are strangers who wouldn't even say hello on the street. He hasn't said anything, but I know in my heart that there's no future for the two of you. I know my boy. He loved you so much, enough to force himself to do things he didn't want to do. If Grandma's voice broke, if you hadn't done something to truly, deeply hurt him, you wouldn't have ended up here. Since Leo has made up his mind, you should stop coming here. Grandma turned her head away, a clear dismissal. Clara stood there dejectedly for a moment, then put down the things she was holding and left. Though she stopped showing up at the hospital every day, she would still occasionally find me to put on a show of her deep affection. She told me she had sent David back to his own home and that no one would bother us anymore. Oh right, David had been faking his amnesia. He was never sick at all. When Clara found out the truth, she was furious and cut ties with him. Clara apologized profusely, crying and telling me she couldn't live without me, that her life had no meaning without me. But 3 days later, she saw me having an episode. It was my birthday again. I took out my old phone to listen to my parents' voices. Suddenly, the audio started skipping. At the same time, I got a text from Clara. Leo, only my friend can fix that audio file. Let me know if you need help. Before I could even process how she knew, I rushed to a nearby phone repair shop. The technician told me the audio was generated by code and they couldn't fix it. The original phone had nothing on it. I don't know how I got back that day. All I could think was how foolish I had been for the past few years. That familiar, restless anxiety started bubbling up inside me. My mind replayed the sound of my childhood self in the car, rushing my parents. And then the all-consuming flames. I spent the whole night scratching my arms. When Dr. Mason found me the next morning, one of my arms was a bloody mess. I felt a demon inside me trying to break out, and every person who came near was one of its minions. I started attacking indiscriminately. I threw anything I could get my hands on, screaming and crying. Clara arrived at that moment. She stared at me, her face pale, the bouquet in her hands falling to the floor, petals scattering everywhere. She was terrified by this side of me she had never seen. My hair was a mess. My clothes were stained with blood. I looked like a madman. Quick, get the tranquilizer. As the needle came closer, I fought back even more violently. It took several doctors, but they still couldn't hold me down. My screams echoed through the entire floor. Suddenly, a frail figure rushed forward and hugged me. She smelled of crisp oranges and the faint scent of disinfectant from being in the hospital so long. I sank my teeth into her shoulder. Lily let out a muffled grunt. Her hand gently patted my back. It's okay. A metallic taste filled my mouth. The doctors seized the opportunity and injected the sedative. In the middle of the chaos, Lily's face was streaked with tears, her eyes full of worry. Clara, still in shock, fled in terror. When I woke up, I stared out the window for a long time. I didn't even notice when Lily came in. She was holding a file, her thin lips pressed together. Leo, someone from her office brought this. I opened it calmly. Inside was the signed divorce agreement. Thank you. I sat there in a daze for a long time. Lily just stayed by my side, not saying a word. 2 weeks later, my grandma was looking much better and insisted on going home. I've been lying in this bed for so long, my old bones are about to fall apart. She stroked my head. How long has it been since you've had grandma's wontons? Don't you miss them? I checked with her doctor, and after getting his approval, I took grandma home. The house was a little dusty, and the peach tree in the yard was in faint bloom. Grandma sat in her wheelchair, basking in the sun, watching me clean. Leo, she called out suddenly. Come here. I knelt down and rested my head on her lap, just like when I was a child. When other kids would taunt me for not having parents, she would always rush out with a broom to chase them away. then stroke my head and say, "Your mom and dad will always be the ones who love you most." Grandma's voice blended with the memory from my childhood. Even if there was nothing on that phone, the fact that they love you will never change. You've trapped yourself in the grief of that accident for so long. It's time to move on. Forgive yourself and look forward. That's what your parents would want most. I blinked back, the tears stinging my eyes. Grandma knew everything all along. She smiled and wiped my tears. There. I'll make you wontons tonight. Okay. For the next few days at home, Grandma's spirits were high, especially today. She woke up early to make me breakfast, then pulled out a bunch of old trinkets to polish. In the evening, she made a dozen boxes of wontons and put them in the freezer. "You made so many. They'll go bad before we can eat them all." She smiled. "Lily's been craving them. I made extra so you can share some with her. Don't worry about that. You should go rest." Grandma sighed. "All right, you nag more than an old lady." I helped her to bed. Before I closed the door, she suddenly called my name. "Leo." "I'm here, Grandma." There was a moment of silence. Then she smiled. "It's nothing. You can go." The next morning, the house was unnaturally quiet. Grandma was lying peacefully in her bed, perfectly still. I held her hand and cried alone for a long time. Before we went home, I had met with her doctor. He had told me, "Your grandma's illness has been dragging on for over 3 years. Her body is just too worn out. We can't make any promises. Just try to fulfill any wishes she has." Even though I was prepared, the pain was still immense. After the funeral, I took her wontons to Lily. The box had a note. "For my friend, Lily." There would be no more laughter between an old woman and a young girl in the hospital. My illness came and went. Dr. Mason suggested I try living in a new environment. I thought about it, but ended up renting an apartment near the hospital. If I left too, Lily would be truly alone. Lately, when I went to see her, there were always a few bodyguards standing outside her room. Inside, a woman who looked strikingly similar to Lily was fussing over her. After they left, I brought Lily her meal as usual. Her face was even paler than before. "You saw, right? That woman just now, she's my mother." My hand paused. "Yeah, I figured. You look a lot alike." Lily lowered her eyes. "She came to." She trailed off. I handed her a bowl of porridge. "You said they were busy before. Are they done being busy now?" Lily smiled and nodded. "Yeah." I wanted to ask more, but a nurse came to change Lily's dressing. The topic was dropped. Looking back, I regret not asking more. If I had, maybe things would have turned out differently. Lily told me she was going into isolated treatment and that we wouldn't see each other for a long time. She still spoke in her gentle, soft voice as she handed me her sketchbook. "Leo, this is my most precious possession. When I finish my treatment, I'll come find you for it. Okay?" Her arms were covered in needle marks, a shocking canvas of purple and blue. I took it and promised, "I'll wait for you to come out and give it back to you myself." Lily smiled at me, then quickly turned away and followed the doctors and nurses. If I had looked closer, I would have seen the tear that fell to the floor the moment she turned. Spring turned to fall and time flew by. In the blink of an eye, it had been almost a year since I'd seen Lily. Winter came early in the city, blanketing the streets in white. I suddenly received a message. It was from Lily. Just 4 words. "I want to see you." Almost instantly, I was sprinting toward the hospital. I arrived, breathless, to find Lily already waiting for me at the entrance. It was the first time I had ever seen her in anything other than a hospital gown. She stood in the falling snow, her hand outstretched to catch a snowflake. Her face was so pale it seemed to melt into the white landscape. Lily was even thinner now, her clothes hanging loosely on her frame. She recognized me immediately, even bundled up as I was. She smiled. "Leo." I took off my scarf and wrapped it around her neck. "You've gotten bold, running out of the hospital like this. You can't be in the cold. Let's go back inside." Lily took my hand. "Leo, I've been discharged." I froze. "Really, I'm not lying. My isolated treatment was a success." She held up a discharge form. "Come with me. I've been in this city for so many years, but I've never really seen it." It takes a normal person 10 minutes to walk from Main Street to Elm Street. Took me and Lily nearly an hour. Her steps grew heavier, her breathing more labored. My eyes reddened and I supported her. Who signed this discharge form? What kind of quack doctor? Let's go back. Lily shook her head. Leo, I never want to go back there again. She let go of me and stood on her own, feeling the wind and snow. This is the first time I've ever felt so clearly that I'm alive. She forced a smile and pointed to a vendor in the distance. Let's go. I want to buy some candied fruit. You wait here. I'll go get it. Lily shook her head, stubbornly moving forward on her own. The short 50-meter distance was like walking on knives. For her, every step was a struggle. After that, I took her to a movie, and we listened to everyone complain about how bad it was. We ate super spicy hot pot. We played claw machines at an arcade. We went skating on a frozen river. By the end, Lily couldn't even lift her feet anymore. I was crying as I fumbled for my phone to call an ambulance. Lily waved her hand, and when she opened her mouth, a trickle of blood came out. Leo, it's no use. Don't bother. My hands trembled as I held her. Tell me what to do. Lily, what do I do? She pointed to a nearby bench. Help me sit down. Okay. Lily hooked her finger around mine. Leo, will you go buy me some cotton candy? That hot pot was really spicy. My face was covered in tears. I looked at her and shook my head. Please go, she said, looking down at her own delicate hands. I'm begging you. Don't watch. Blood started to trickle from Lily's nose. I held back my tears, stumbled to my feet, and walked toward the cotton candy stand. Leo, remember to keep walking forward. Don't look back. Behind me, the crowd bustled with shouts, screams, and sirens, a chaotic noise that made my head ache. Epilogue. It was from Dr. Mason that I learned about the inhumane treatment Lily had endured that year. It all started with her mother. Lily's mother was only 20 when she got pregnant by a man who was already married. To get more money out of him, she hid in the countryside during her pregnancy, taking all sorts of folk remedies to ensure she'd have a boy. As a result, Lily was born prematurely with a frail constitution. Her mother took the baby, got a large sum of money, and disappeared, never to be seen again. At first, Lily's father treated her decently enough, since he was already 50 and had no son. But when Lily turned 21, his wife gave birth to a late-in-life son. From that point on, Lily, the sickly one, was completely abandoned and left to rot in the hospital. Later, the little boy got sick and needed a bone marrow transplant. Only then did her father remember he had a ready-made daughter in the hospital. After confirming that Lily's bone marrow was healthy, they took her away. But how could someone who coughed at a gust of wind endure the pain of having their marrow extracted? When Lily went into the operating room, she was prepared to die. I don't know what kept her going, Dr. Mason said sorrowfully. After the transplant, she was barely hanging on. Her father, fearing his son might need more marrow later, had the hospital keep her alive. Lily was put through several more extractions. By the time she was discharged, she was on her last legs. I clutched Lily's sketchbook and sobbed. She knew she was dying. That's why she so desperately wanted to walk all the roads she had never traveled. In the end, Lily's father's son didn't make it through the winter. His wife divorced him. In his old age, he was left all alone. I heard about Clara from Amy. She ended up marrying David after all, but she couldn't stand his suffocating possessiveness and filed for divorce. David refused, so Clara took it to the courts. The day he received the court summons, David stormed into her office and stabbed her 44 times. She survived, but she'll have to spend the rest of her life in bed, attached to a colostomy bag. I said goodbye to Dr. Mason, packed my bag, and decided to see the places in Lily's sketchbook. I watched the sunset over the Grand Canyon. I felt the breeze in the streets of Paris. I took a picture with fellow climbers on Mount Everest. I biked along the California coast. In the end, all the vulnerabilities that I once thought were so monumental, so all-consuming, didn't seem so big after all. I saw the world Lily never got to see, taking her with me on the journey she never had the chance to take. Lily was right. I am very lucky, and the world just happens to be so wonderful. If you don't know why you need to go far away, just wait. Someone will eventually become the destination you're searching for.